Okay, welcome back everybody. Did you guys have a good brunch? Thumbs up, thumbs down, kind of thumbs up? Nice. Okay, glad that you guys enjoyed it. We will now be commencing the speaker tracks for the symposium. I would like to invite Tui Ting, our moderator for the technology and innovation track, onto stage to start the session. Tui Ting, please.
Test. Okay, good morning everyone. I hope everyone had a good lunch because after filling your stomachs, now we're going to fill your brains. My name is Tui Ting and I'll be your moderator for our first track. This track is titled Technology and Innovation. This track is specially curated with this year's World Wildlife Day theme to spotlight and celebrate efforts in Southeast Asia, which have utilized technology and innovation to advance wildlife conservation in the region. We have a diverse range of speakers based in Vietnam, Cambodia, and Singapore. Each of them bring unique perspectives, approaches, and experience in their respective fields. We hope that through these sharings, you will learn more about how digital innovation has aided conservation efforts and be inspired to harness the powers of technology for nature. Our first speaker for the first track is Mr. Nguyen Van Thai. Mr. Thai is a veteran conservationist who has spent 2 decades of his life for conservation. He is the founder and executive director of Save Vietnam's Wildlife, a national non-profit organization aiming to prevent species extinction and to promote the recovery of threatened wildlife. Among other things, Save Vietnam's Wildlife has made notable contributions to global pangolin conservation. Mr. Thai will showcase how Save Vietnam's Wildlife innovates by applying technologies like drones and cameras to monitor and protect wildlife in Vietnam. Mr. Thai, please.
Yeah, so Save Vietnam Wildlife, we have, the session today is applying to, innovation technology to protect wildlife in Vietnam, and of course a lot of the different technologies we've been used to work in to protect the animal. But my focus of the presentation today is talking more about the poacher cam, smart patrolling, and wildlife drone checking. First, I want to brief a bit about the Save Vietnam Wildlife. So we have over 65 staff working across the country with the 4 different offices. Our work is focused a lot about the site protection, rescue and conservation breeding animal, conservation research, education outreach, and working with government to change the policy. First part of the presentation today, I want to share the story with you guys about how you tracking the animal. And as you know, in Vietnam, we have over 20 rescue central court country, and every year we rescue thousands animals and release them back to the wild. But it's challenging for us to know how animals doing, do they survive, do they adapt to natural environment, or even we understand better about the ecology and their behavior. So we're working together with wildlife drone company from Australia to develop this technology and first time applied to pangolin. So Save Vietnam Wildlife, we've been rescue over nearly 2,000 individuals of the pangolin. When we release animal, we attach the transmitter on the back of the pangolin. We start using the hand tracking, and this is challenging because we only be able to track one animal at one time. And also it's the problem because when we go to the forest, it's not easy to get the access. But with the wildlife drone, we put the transmitter on the pangolin and attach the receiver on the drone. And we can fly in the forest and be able to locate the location where the animal. So that's the location of the animal we saw on the screens, lies on the screens, so we can be able to know where they are in the forest. So with this technology, it saves a huge time and effort for our research team in the field. Before we get very hard to get the access into the dense forest, but now it's much easier for us to track and follow the animal. The second is like we'll be able to track many animals at the same time. So with one fly or drone, if many of them are in that location, we'll be able to pick up all the signal and the location where they are. So that it saves the time for us. We can see the live location on the screen. So if we want to go to the location where the animals sleep, we can go directly to there. So that it make easier for the researcher. And of course, improve the safety of our research when we are working in the field. So that is huge advantage from the using drone to apply for the conservation. But with the drone, we'll be able to monitor the animal. That is showing the survival of the how long we'll be able to track the pangolin. And we'll be able to track the pangolin for over 8 months for the Sunda pangolins. And we also be able to know like the home range, some of the behavior and ecology of the animal. For example, like maximum of the home range of the Sunda pangolin in Vietnam is around 6 kilometers square in the forest when we're tracking them. So that is, with this technology, it makes like the work it's easier. And over 80% of the animal we select be able to survive. And the second part of my presentation today to talking about using the poacher cam and smart patrolling to protect the wildlife. So first talking about the poacher cam, and the camera is now amazing with the AI technology applied to the camera. So we working with Pantera. We bought a poacher cam from Pantera. We set up in the forest where the main access, the poacher or local people often go into the forest and hunt animal. We set up there, and in 3 to 5 seconds, if it takes the photo of the poacher or any photo of the people, that photo will be sent directly to the ranger, or any people have access to that camera information. So like they can send to their phone or they can send to their email. It's up the way you set up. So you know like exactly when and where people go in or go out of the forest. And even if the photo clear enough, you can use that photo to arrest people. So that with this technology, it say a lot of the time, like when you go to patrol in the forest, you just walk in the forest, and it's really hard to follow. So yeah, so you can find it, the location where you set up the poacher cam, it must have a, like the phone signal. Without phone signal, now they also have like the satellite one. It's more expensive. You can set up everywhere in the forest, but I think it's cost over 3,000 US dollar for the satellite poacher cam. With one using the mobile phone or signal, it's much cheaper, like around $300 for a poacher cam. So yeah, so you can see on here it's many photo, and even with the photo of the local people, it has infrared camera, so it don't have a flash, so the poacher cannot know like where the camera. So we can be able to use that to set up like to quickly organize to arrest illegal activity in the forest, or the photo. If the photo clear enough, we can use evidence to arrest people. So far we work is like we set up the poacher cam in the forest, and 627 photos of the people go to the forest illegally were taken, and 64 of them were arrested and we confiscate 10 guns, 2 electric fishing on 56 shops from like the poacher cam. The second is using the smart patrolling to protect the forest. because often it's like when we protect the forest, it's a ranger don't know where or they already go or the manager not be able to make the plan like from the daily working without technology. So with the smart program, we'll be able to know like who is go to the forest, what they are doing in the forest, when they doing that, where they doing, and even need to understand why and how they doing that one. So how we address this? With the smart, like the program, the app that is using in nearly 100 country now for many protected area, it's app like smart. And the manager can be able to understand the information from the park they are managed. The information be collect and analysis from the smart program. We'll be able to improve the monitoring, the patrolling, and also with monitoring biodiversity, like through the smart program. And we evaluate how success of that and continue and be able to make the plan for the patrol and know where the hot spots to make the patrol. So this is showing the one of the national park where we work from 2018 to 2023. And with the smart program, we know exactly where they set up the trap, where they set up the illegal poacher camp, where we can arrest people with a gun. And we'll be able to quickly put all of the information, like how many people involved in patrolling, how many patrol they conduct, or how many days they've been working in the forest. And we can check all of the information, how many people go to the forest illegally, how many people been arrested. For example, like in here, like in Pumat National Park, we found like 941 people go to the forest illegally in the last 5 years. And nearly 400 of them were arrested. 16,340 snare traps been removed. 1,162 illegal camp it been destroyed, and 131 gun it been confiscated. So we be able to check all of the information, what happened in the forest. We know exactly the location where the people go and doing the illegal activity. We also we be able to also map out like where is a professional hunter or trader. So smart is not only apply for when you patrol in the forest, you can apply when you going to engage with community, or like tracking like profile of like all of the trader, hunter, know how they interact with each other. From that, you be able to organize a way to engage with them or arrest the illegal activity. So for example, here like we record all of the location where the illegal professional hunter and illegal wildlife restaurant they locate, and we come to every single of them and engage with them and talking with them to change their behavior and hope they stop doing the poaching. But like the data collect from smart is very powerful to understand how change in the forest. So from the analysis of the data, we follow each year here. You see like the decline of the illegal camp in the forest in Pumat National Park, decline of the number go into the forest, or decline of the number of the snare trap in the forest over there. So you see how things happen over time. And even with if the people collect well information of key species in the forest, you'll be able to tracking how change of the population over time every year. So, and you can map out where the important species, where all of the snare trap, so you can be able to target where you should go to patrol. And combine together with other technology. So like when you know like the decline of the trees in the forest, you can see like from like observe the animal in the forest, but also when you set up the camera trap in the forest there, you check and see the whole chain of the population over time. And from that, you'll be able to see like how your patrol effect to the protect the wildlife. And for example, like one of the key zone area here where we work, and after 4 years, we'll be able to stop illegal poaching activity in the forest there. And from the camera trap and the information of like the ranger collect through smartphone, we'll be able to tell like the increase of the diversity and increase of the specific needs in this area. So it's very powerful like in the data we have to be able to do analysis and checking the whole chain over time. So of course the conservation is not only one tool, one thing can work, it needs to be combined everything together. To protect the forest, it's not only the using smart, not only be using drone or tracking, but it combine every effort to save everything together. And so if you want to learn more about the work and things like that, we're happy to share some of the efforts we've been working and protect the wildlife in Vietnam. And together with the effort from Save Vietnam Wildlife, saving nearly 3,000 kilometers per square of the forest, we saved 34% of the amphibian species in Vietnam, 68% of the bird species, 57% of the mammal, and 27% of reptiles. Many of them are like endangered and critical endangered. So thank you very much for every organization being support us, and thank you very much for Monday Nature and everyone organized here and to invite me and come and to share the talk. If anything we can help you or collaborate with you or discuss with you, please let us know. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tai. Next, our speaker is Dr. Malcolm So. Dr. Malcolm So is a wildlife researcher in Singapore's National Parks Board. He studies the ecology of non-native birds such as pigeons and house crows to formulate measures for their management. He also oversees conservation projects such as a study of the population ecology of the critically endangered straw-headed bubu and satellite tracking of resident and migratory raptors in Singapore. In his presentation, Dr. Malcolm will highlight the range of technology adopted by the National Parks Board to better observe and analyze wildlife ecology. Dr. Malcolm, please.
Right, so I'll talk about how we leverage using technology to study wildlife ecology in Singapore. So again, my name is Malcolm. I'm a researcher with the Wildlife Management Research Branch in National Parks Board of Singapore. Okay, so this is a quick outline of what I'll cover. So introduction into wildlife management, what it means. And then I'll talk about how research can help mitigate human-wildlife conflicts, something in which we get quite a bit in Singapore. And then I'll talk about how we leverage on using tech as a research tool. And mainly I'll talk about just 3 technologies. The first is using acoustic recording units, and then the second would be using satellite tags. And then last, talk about camera traps. Okay, so just a quick introduction to wildlife management. So this has been covered by Sofian a little bit before. Singapore's vision, very nice picture, right? To be a city in nature. So that involves 3 main things. So the first is intensifying greening in Singapore, naturalizing our parks and gardens, planting more trees. Beyond that, also increasing connectivity with our green spaces. And last of which is enhancing animal management. So with that, right? With all this greening effort, you expect that biodiversity would thrive and do really well. And you can see down here, the otters are something in which, I guess in Southeast Asia, if you want to see otters, Singapore would be one of the best places to see them. I remember like 20 years ago, if I wanted to see otters, I had to travel out of Singapore all the way to Malaysia and try and spot them, right? But now there's a high chance of seeing otters all around our city. But of course, with increasing biodiversity in our small little state with a lot of people, there's also increasing likelihood of human-wildlife conflicts. I would say probably not as dramatic as this guy down here, fearing for his life in his encounter with otters, but yes, at times it can be a costly affair. So what does NParks do about these human-wildlife conflicts? So we adopt a science-based approach to try and mitigate these human-wildlife issues. So to take you through this scientific process, to take you through the aim of our research, it's for us simply is to better understand nature. And again, we use this framework of the scientific method to go about our research. So we come up first with an idea or a hypothesis, then we go out as researchers do to collect the data, and then we analyze the data, and then we say, yes, what does the results all mean, right? And does that agree with your idea or hypothesis? So where the tech comes in is mainly here, right? In terms of the data collection, and in some instances also for analysis of the data. So let's go into the different kinds of tech in which we use to help us in our research. So the first of which is using acoustic recording units, so shortened as ARUs. So these are simply devices that are used to record sounds from wildlife. Okay, so there's a certain process to doing this, and these are the three main ways or processes in which we set up ARU. So the first thing in which we do is we add in a recording schedule. So that very much depends on the animal of interest down here. So if it's birds, you want to set the recording schedule to be in the morning because they're more active in the morning. And if you're looking at owls, then of course you set your recording schedule to be in the evening, right? Then after that, you set out your ARUs in the field. So, and then later on, you can detect the species using software that automate the detection process. So that's using, like machine learning methods and so on, right? So in the past, these ARUs used to be quite costly. So a unit like the one on the left costs about $600 or so. But now they're getting a lot cheaper. So these ones that you see right at the bottom in which we use audio morphs, and they cost about less than $100. Yeah. The reason why it's quite expensive previously, the commercially available ones, is because the cases, the protective cases that encase that hardware over there is quite costly. So audio morphs, you simply buy just, that over there without the protective casing. And if you're a little bit tight on budget, then you can just slap on a Ziploc bag, and that will do, right? Okay, so in NParks, we use these sound recorders to detect the critically endangered straw-headed bobo. As you all know, right, they're critically endangered essentially because of poaching and also because of habitat loss. Now, interestingly, Singapore is a stronghold for them, right? So I think the last estimate was around 600 individuals or so. So in our current study, we're trying to get an updated estimate, but also trying to get a sense of where they're distributed in Singapore. So this is a collaborative effort we've entered into together with NSS, the Nature Society of Singapore, the Bird Group, again, to determine the factors that affect their occurrences in Singapore. So the ARUs are also deployed to detect their presence aside to just using citizen scientists and researchers to go out and survey them in the field. right? So for this one, the data is still being analyzed and give you more updates on our research later on. Okay, we also use satellite tags. So satellite tags essentially are devices that track very precise movements of animals in their natural environments. I would say in terms of tracking devices, they are more or less the gold standard. So having this gold standard also means that the devices don't come cheap, right? So something like this here is a small little device in which we use to track some of the larger birds that will cost close to about 2,000 US dollars for one device. Yeah, so it comes with an antenna. So the antenna receives signals from a network of satellites to determine the GPS location. And then this device has a transmitter also that sends location and other sensor data like temperature if you want to a central repository for data storage and retrieval. In terms of how we fit these satellite tags on animals, we use harnesses. In this one, you see the harness attachments in which we use almost like a Teflon thin ribbon to attach it to our birds. For mammals, we use collars, so they'll go around the neck. And sometimes you can even use glue, so that's more for marine animals like turtles. So you can just stick it on their shell at the back. Okay, so we use tags here in our use case to track raptors. So raptors, there are two kinds, the migratory and the resident raptors. So we track them essentially to determine their home range, to determine their habitat preferences, and also if it's a migrant, to track the migratory routes as well. Okay, so in case you're wondering how we get these high-flying raptors, most of them are actually rescued and rehabilitated at our Center for Wildlife Rehab. And once they're assessed to be healthy, then we tag some of these suitable individuals to track where they go. So you see down there, that's Kaining. So that's one of our staff that's involved in tracking the bird. You can see she's quite happy. It's very therapeutic, as you can tell. The bird at the bottom there, that's Oriental honey buzzard. So you can see that tag on its back. So just to share some preliminary results, this is one of the birds in which we track. That's a white-bellied sea eagle, a very impressive bird of prey. So we released them somewhere in, yes, I think it's somewhere in Sungai Buloh. Right, and then it moved quite a fair bit, but a white-bellied sea eagle being a coastal bird, it follows the coastline quite a bit, or even riverbanks. And the initial stages, you see down there, the darker shade of the circles, that represents more exploratory phase. Yes, so it's moving around, trying to find a place to settle. And then eventually when it did, it settled on the bank of this river, Sungai Johor, settled down there, and then you can estimate the home range around that area. Right, this is another resident raptor in which we also tracked. I think what's interesting for this one is a changeable hawk eagle, is that you see there's an influence also of when you track them. So if you track them before their breeding season, you would see that their home range is actually quite a bit wider. And if you track them during the breeding season, the home range shrinks to quite a bit. So happy to say they've chosen to breed in Singapore. So we think there's a pair down there breeding in Singapore. Okay, so I'll move on to the last tech, and that's camera traps. So camera traps covered before earlier, like the earlier speaker. It's a digital camera that records photos or videos of wildlife. So this works essentially with a passive infrared sensor that triggers the camera to record something as the animal is moving by. And then if you're wondering how it works at night, how do you get the images at night, how do you get a video footage at night, that's because of the infrared LED, so it illuminates the animal in the evening time. So we use this tech essentially to investigate, right, whether animals, the frequency of animals using wildlife crossings. So one particular use case on here is at Old Upper Thompson Road. So we have a one-way road and there are forests on both sides of the road. So if you have forests on both sides of the road, animals will likely want to cross, okay? So we have to find some way to facilitate their movement across the road. So how? First thing we do is we have road closures. That happens in the evening times, right? So if you want to drive through Old Upper Thompson Road at night, it's not possible. So the animals can freely cross. Evening time. And also interestingly, there are culverts there. So the culverts are like almost like tunnels that go under the roads. And originally, they were meant for irrigation purposes. But surprisingly, the animals also use them to cross, right? Quite a fair bit. So that's interesting also for us. Other measures include lowering the speed limit. And also we have this early animal detection system, right? So there's an animal that crosses, the CCTV that's there, right? That can pick up the animal that's crossing. And then you see that sign on there with the light bulb, it will light up and warn the motorist that there's an animal that's crossing, maybe you should slow down. Oh, last thing to mention, of course, I shouldn't leave primates out, is there's a road bridge also, so for border animals to cross as well. Okay, so for us, we're more interested in the bit more terrestrial mammals, and we want to see for whether or not, what's the frequency of mammals using road crossings, what's the frequency of mammals using the culverts. Right, so this is some video footage to show you, can you see what animal is crossing the road or not? Oh, is it working? Oh, there it comes. Wait for it. There you go. Can you tell what it is? Pangolin, right? Yes, right, so that's your Sunda pangolin. So interesting that it chooses to use the road to cross here, but of course, these are the culverts that I'm mentioning. They also use the culverts to cross. So what's 20S? It's lurking in the dark. And it's just about to appear. Ta-da. So cute, right? This one. That's a wild boar. And this one is one of those gems that you find in the forest. Very shy, very elusive, also using the culvert. So it's using camera traps at the culverts to monitor the wildlife that's using these crossings. A little bit of grooming there. And there it goes. So that's a lesson mouse deer. Yes. So just a very broad conclusions on this bit of research. We've written this up into a publication. Hopefully it gets published soon, and we'll share that with you at some point in time. But the broad conclusion is essentially this, right? That the animals do use the roads for crossing as well as cover. So the road closures do help quite a bit, and also for sure some of the animals use the culverts as well. But I would say not all roads are suited for these wildlife crossings. Surely you can't put some of these culverts under certain expressways and so on and so forth. So just want to put it out there that sometimes depends very much on the situation. You can't always implement all these wildlife crossings across all different kinds of roads. So just very quick thanks to my staff at Wildlife Management Research, whether or not you're alumni member, whether or not you're current staff, Wildlife Management Outreach, Center for Wildlife Rehab, NSS, Senior Management for their support in research, and also the World Wildlife Day Organizing Committee for inviting me over to give this talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Malcolm. Rounding up our first track is Mr. Anton Delgado. Mr. Anton is a multimedia journalist covering news and environment across Cambodia and Southeast Asia with the Pulitzer Center. Previously, Anton reported on environment for Southeast Asia Globe, the Arizona Republic, and USA Today. Today, Anton will share with us about how we can harness digital technology with storytelling skills to deliver important messages about the state of today's world, and also to amplify efforts, the conservation efforts using digital technology to push this message to readers around Southeast Asia and the globe. Mr. Anton, please.
Good morning, everybody. I'm so excited to be here with you in Singapore. I flew in from Cambodia, and I'm excited to share some of my experiences covering conservation across Southeast Asia, but specifically in the Mekong region. So my goal for today is to have everyone here leave with some tangible tips and tricks for how you can improve your environmental communications. So let's hopefully get that done. I'm going to do that by sharing 3 life lessons I live by as a reporter. So that's how this is going to be broken down. We have 15 minutes until our Q&A, so we have 5 minutes per lesson, so I'll try to speed by. So first and foremost, I need the students here especially, who will become our next generation of academics and researchers, to rethink data and let numbers talk. I think this is something key to all conservation and environmental communication, that from what I've seen, we've not yet reached the more creative side of how to communicate these numbers. So I want to go through these lessons by giving a couple of examples of stories that I've covered. Last summer, I got to traverse Vietnam to report on a few of the last wild Asian elephant herds across the country. Most of my packages for the Southeast Asia Globe and the Pulitzer Center are multimedia, so we'll have a text story, sometimes a video, and photos. So naturally, with elephants, we decided to do the whole multimedia package. The crux of this entire story came from excellent data from Vietnam's Forestry Administration presented in a 30-page PDF that nobody bothered to look at. But that's where this entire pitch came from. They had for the first time tracked how many wild elephants were left and where they were. That is incredible data, but nobody knew what it meant. And that was something that as I was sifting through this and trying to come up with the pitch, we realized that we needed to show this to our editors so that they would care and understand what this actually means for these elephants. So we turned it into a graphic map that geolocated these elephants and showed where they were. And what was fantastic was that this illustrated a lot of the issues that conservationists were telling us the elephants were facing, from habitat loss to separation and an inability to mate between herds. And this is what led to the entire project. Another story, actually the first story I did in Cambodia on conservation focused on the Siamese crocodile and the huge trade surrounding this species and its critical endangered status that was sponsored by the harvesting of their skins for high luxury products. Again, because of the fact that this was a wildlife story and crocodiles, we decided to do the full multimedia. As it is the 51st anniversary of CITES, which I did not know, naturally a lot of this story had to do with the data that we got from the public database of CITES. How many people here have downloaded CITES data? Not enough, and I don't blame you because it looks like this. It is really hard to analyze CITES data. You get these gargantuan Excel files because CITES goes back to the 70s. So if you really want to see all the trends of 50 years, it's exceedingly difficult to understand. But we got to take a look at all of the imports and exports of Siamese crocodiles, a critically endangered species, from Mekong countries, and show what it meant in trends over time. And this, again, is what communicates this incredible research, these incredible tools that are at our disposal to make it accessible for a reader and an audience member. My last newsroom for Southeast Asia Globe wasn't exactly an environmental publication, so my editors were consistently telling me, why would someone who has never read about crocodiles, who doesn't know what CITES stands for, why would they read this, and what should they take away? And that's something that I really want all of the future academics and researchers to focus on. Not all of our audience members are inherently scientists or researchers. So naturally, I'm a impoverished freelance journalist now in Cambodia. So none of the tools or pieces of advice that I want to give you guys will require subscriptions or paying, okay? It is all free. So no excuse lah. We have Flourish and Data Wrapper, which are both, every graphic that you just saw were created on these free apps. And as I understand when older generations, not old generations, just older than my generation, don't like using these apps. I get it. You need to sit down and we need to practice and learn. For everybody else in the Gen Z group like me, you have no excuse. We are digital natives. We should inherently be thinking in these terms. So if you were to write down anything from this presentation, Flourish and Data Wrapper. I want to see school reports. I want to see posters with better data visualization so that I can understand what the heck you're trying to show me. Again, it's free. Okay. I was trained as a reporter first. I did 4 years of my bachelor's degree in journalism, and it was all writing. What I realized was writing became my crutch, and in the modern age, that just doesn't work. So while text and the written word is a fantastic way to communicate some ideas, don't overwrite. Rely on some visuals. I see a lot of interest here. This is the Mekong giant catfish. It was a fish release in Cambodia. So again, don't overwrite, visualize. And some examples. NASA announced a new partnership with a couple of organizations in Thailand and Cambodia to use their satellites to monitor the Mekong River, which was fascinating. But it is a little technical. You know, we're trying to explain how the satellites rotate over the Mekong and how people can use that data to understand and predict natural disasters. So this was especially important for riverside communities. One of the things that we were trying to get across was how one of the human-made impacts affecting the Mekong River are the dams upstream. So in Phnom Penh, where I live, and this is actually quite near my house, you can see the confluence of two incredible rivers, the Tonle Sap and the Mekong River. The Mekong River is blue because of overdamming upstream. So the amount of sediments flowing down the Mekong to Cambodia are much less. You can see the sedimented Tonle Sap River on the left. Do you know what this would have looked like, trying to explain this in words? South of Phnom Penh, two rivers confluence by the edge of Choi Chang Bar. The over-sedimentation of the Tonle Sap can be seen, but it's too much, and people won't understand what you mean. Remember, I'm assuming most of you haven't seen this, and many of our readers haven't been to Cambodia. So I think having the visuals to showcase this and having a small caption underneath explaining, look at the color difference, this is impacted by the lack of sediment flow in the Mekong, really shows this. On that same story, we asked NASA for some of their images to show pre- and post-damming and the impact of that. So we were able to take pictures from the border of Laos and Thailand where the Mekong River flowed between 5 years when 2 dams in that area went operational. And you can see the difference. On Flourish, which we were just talking about, we created a slider effect so that readers both on their phone and on their computers could slide and see the impact of dams over the period of 5 years. This is what I mean by creativity. These apps will do it for you. I'm not encouraging anybody here to be a coder or a graphic designer. I know we all have our different professions, but these apps make it easy. All I had to do was upload 2 photos and put in the caption. I didn't code the graphics for this. So I want to stress that as much as possible. I'm not telling people to go into code or AI, but use the tools that are free and available to us today. So naturally, one of the reasons why I think I came here on this topic of not overriding and visualizing is because of my collaboration with the Straits Times. That's how I met some of the members of the National Parks Board here. So 2 years ago, I worked with 2 reporters on a collaboration between the Straits Times and the Southeast Asia Globe. The good news for all of you is that both of the reporters I worked with still work for the Straits Times. So please support your national newspaper and follow their work. They do excellent environmental work. So our story focused on the snaring crisis in the Mekong and the impacts of overpoaching and the consumption of wild meat on human health. Naturally, we were just talking about snares, but how many of these people knew what snares were before they came to the symposium? Okay, a few more. How many had actually seen a snare in action? Not confiscated, even less. So that's something that we were trying to communicate. What do these traps look like, and why are they so devastating? So we really needed to, one, we had to find the snares, which was a terrible experience. And then we also had to showcase them and show how the noose trap could catch everything from a pangolin to an elephant leg. So that was really key for us, communicating this crisis. Something that I took away from this was, I think I've gotten quite stuck in my ways. I'm photo and video first, followed by data graphics. That's my range of multimedia. Audrey, with her creativity, pushed us to go into graphics and comics because she believed that even in our generation, some people didn't respond to photo and video anymore. And especially for the next gen behind us, they were starting to interact with multimedia in different ways. So this was a lesson for me. I had never once thought to communicate my reporting through comics or graphics, but the way that this connected with a younger audience was astounding. So I think this is an example of how, especially in my generation, for all of us in the Gen Z group, we need to be constantly learning, especially if we're not only communicating to older members, but also younger members. Now, granted, since I am Gen Z, I'm sure there are a lot of folks wondering, how do I know this was really a successful project? Well, guaranteed this was a success because I made the family WhatsApp group. So, That's my dad, who's here today, and I made the family chat with this project. So guaranteed that was a success. I think that is the Asian barometer for success. If we make the family chat, we did our jobs well. So it works. So the last part that I want to talk about is finding human hooks. Now this is a long-tailed macaque, which is native here in Singapore as well. And I think the story that I'm about to walk you through brings all of these three elements together, and I want to show you why that mattered and how it actually changed the entire outcome. So I had been pretty intense on doing these long-form features on environmental stories. My editors asked me, for the love of God, please just go out there and write a 500-word cultural story on the environment. But don't make it a 2,000-word multimedia, but just write us faster content. So I said, okay, fine, I'll try. So I went to Angkor Wat and I did a small feature on these bloggers that follow long-tailed macaques the entire day for a living and post it online, and this is how they make a living as wildlife influencers on YouTube and Facebook. As I was chatting with them, naturally I asked, how much money do you make in this? And they said, this is the small monkey business. This is nothing compared to what Cambodia actually does with these macaques. And that's what led to a 3-year-long investigation with 4 partners and more than 8 parts and segments. So I totally failed my editor's instructions. So long-tailed macaques are the most traded primate in the world. And why is that? Scientific research. If anyone here has been vaccinated for COVID-19, that vaccine was developed because of animal testing on macaques. So that was the human hook. Instantly, groups like NBC, Continentalist, the Toronto Star, they all wanted to work for us because nobody had known this. All the vaccines that we benefited from were experimented on this endangered species. And this trade, this reliance on long-tailed macaques has pushed them closer to extinction. So that's the human hook. Naturally, it's a very visual story. So we needed to show what these macaques looked like. We had to go to the farms in Cambodia that farm out these macaques and send them off. And we needed to showcase the individuals involved in this trade. Again, we moved back to CITES, so we have decades worth of excellent import and export data, and we had to show that in a way that made sense. Thankfully, we had groups like Continentalist here in Singapore that helped us with our visuals, and that was a key part of having all of these 3 things come together. The outcome of that was incredible. I just finished an assignment for Bloomberg that's also about macaques because our coverage has continued to reach new audience members. Our stories have led to US federal subpoenas and has been cited in indictments. Reporters involved in this, including myself, have been interviewed by lawyers who are filing civil lawsuits against the companies importing these macaques. So this is what happens when you make your information understandable through innovative storytelling techniques. And I can't stress that enough. You might have the best information in the world, but if it's not understandable, if you can't work through it, and if it's not quickly understandable, because our attention spans are getting shorter, it becomes quite difficult for the public to realize and understand. So again, I know we're running low on time, so I just wanted to hit this one last time. Lessons I live by as an environmental communicator, which I hope all of you are trying to be. Please rethink data. Let numbers talk and invest in the time and creativity to make these numbers talk. Don't overwrite, visualize. Most of us here will rely on our words because we're more comfortable in that medium or format. Push yourself a little bit more. This also goes for the generations outside of Gen Z. You can do this, the tools are available, and there are so many help desks that allow people to do this. And the last thing, and actually perhaps the hardest for most conservationists and researchers that I've met, is finding human hooks. If you do not explain to people why these wildlife matter, I'm afraid a lot of them might not care. And that is the hard truth that journalists have found out all across the world. Even though we think the stories are important and we are passionate about it, the audience doesn't connect. So please do whatever you can. If you're tracking snaring, if you're tracking endangered birds, if you're creating these tunnels, explain why that would impact a Singaporean on the street driving on Thompson Road. Right? Explain why that would impact somebody in Ho Chi Minh. Why do these animals being removed from forests impact my city? And I think that's something that is exceedingly difficult to do, but if we don't do it, we will not get the funding, interest, or support that we need to do this type of work. Again, this takes a lot of time and practice, so for especially the students in the room or the conservation groups, if you want to walk through potential ideas on how to do this, I'd be happy to chat. There are a lot of different tools. I've went through 2 of the quickest tools as possible because we only had 15 minutes, but there's a lot available online that allows us to do this. So I would encourage you to start practicing from classroom presentations all the way to PhD research. So please get in touch. Happy to continue this conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Anton. We'll invite him to stay on stage for our panel discussion. While we wait for our team to set up the panel discussion, the audience, you can start thinking of questions to ask our speakers because we are opening this panel discussion up for Q&A from the audience. So earlier, we had the opportunity to hear from our three speakers about how technology can help monitor wildlife, even monitor how humans interact with wildlife, and also how we can use digital innovation to come and push out these new technologies to let people know and the impact that they can make. So I think the first question I want to start off the panel with is, what kind of challenges do you face when you try to integrate digital innovation into your conservation efforts or into your work? What kind of things make it a bit more difficult than it could be? Anyone can start.
For me, it's because the time it's very short, so it not be able to tell how everything. For example, like when we're talking about using the wildlife drone to check the animal, and it worked very well in the forest, very flat, and where you have a lot of the space to like start fly drone or land up drone. Without that, you not be able to use this technology to apply to tracking the animal. So the lesson learned from early when we did in Puma National Park, where very mountainous area, hard to get the access, and very quickly because you don't have a many place to land off the drone, and it's very quickly you lose the animal when they move too far. You cannot be able to continue to tracking them. But in other, like the national park in the South Vietnam, it's very flat. It have some of the tourist roads inside the forest, so we be able to access easily, and it make it very easy. So yeah, so we see the technology is not always apply to everything. It depends on the condition and where you are working, and yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just thinking about this in terms of using the camera traps and also in terms of using acoustic recorders. The big challenge actually is well, one of which is data storage. So you get chunks and chunks of data, which you accumulate, more so with video recordings. So the challenge here actually is to try and process all of this digital data as quickly as possible, because very soon, if you're doing this for a long time, you run out of space, and it's quite costly to store all this information. So trying to use software, in which we mentioned earlier on, to automate the detection process is really important. So it's not entirely perfect in terms of the software and where it's at right now, but I think it's improving all the time. So hopefully that helps us quite a bit in terms of our processing time. I would say also for satellite tags, it's a bit of, to some degree, it's a bit of Russian roulette to some degree. I say that essentially because when you tag a bird, you just never really know how long you can tag the bird for. So in some instances, if you're really lucky, you can tag the bird for a year or more. And then in some other instances, the bird is really perturbed by, they don't like the tag on their backs and stuff, and then they will go and try and rip it off, in a matter of days, right? So that's like $2,000 US, a little bit down the drain. so we hope to have long-term data, but sometimes it's, animals are animals, you don't know what you get, right? And yeah, sometimes it's just that, yeah.
I'd say a challenge that I've had using some of the tools that I shared was making it accessible. So we've heard back from some of our readers that a lot of our tools don't load depending on internet speeds, and a lot of these graphics aren't available in different languages. So that's a challenge that we've had trying to communicate this information, but we really haven't found a solution to just yet. How do we improve ASEAN-wide internet connection and make these tools accessible in multiple languages, including indigenous languages. So that's something that I think a lot of journalists and communication teams haven't figured out. So that's a challenge for me.
Okay, yes, very interesting. So I'm hearing that technology is not magic. It comes with a lot of different kinks here. Sometimes it's not reliable. You have to rely on internet connection, and sometimes it's really too much data to process. So on this note, I would like to ask the panelists, it's also related to a question asked by one member of the audience, Chuan Yin, about how we can engage local communities to encourage them to take up these new technologies. And I'd like to expand that a bit. In general, how do you think we can accelerate the adoption of these new technologies? Maybe it can be regarding local communities, or maybe in research, or in conservation, or in journalism. How do we try to accelerate the adoption?
If I'm thinking about one way, is to make the tech cheaper, for sure. I mean, if you consider the passive acoustic recorders, right? Like I mentioned earlier on, the commercially available ones are not cheap, right? They cost about, actually more expensive than a camera trap, right? And this records just audio. So initially, it will cost somewhere in the region of about a few $100 USD or Singapore dollars, about equivalent to about 600 or so US dollars. And now with these PhD students from University of Southampton, they came out with this fantastic audio morph, that's made it so accessible to people and researchers. So previously, if you were to go out and use acoustic recorders, you are limited by how many you can set up because of the cost of which, it's not cheap to do so. But now with these audio morphs, they're so cheap, and in terms of the quality, are so excellent. You don't need fancy protective casings. If you want to, like I showed in the picture over there, you can use something as simple as a Ziploc bag, and that would do the work of just keeping the water out, right? So making it cheaper, open sourcing the technology, right, would I think go a long way in encouraging some of these citizen scientists to use tech to track animals in the wild. Yeah.
I think our region is a very difficult place to invest in creating more journalists in local communities. I don't know many governments here that would be very happy with that. So I think the way that I would try to engage with local communities more, considering the fact that the journalism industry is struggling and we're in a region where where the free press is an issue, I think we need to be more accessible on the applications that communities are already on. So what first comes to mind to me is Facebook. And if we can now train community members to post pictures of sightings, or like we just saw on the presentation, post roadkills of snakes or other amphibians, we can now collect more data that can lead to either journalists being interested in covering the story or academics going after research. But I've found that a lot of the communities I work with, despite the fact that some of them do have internet and have Facebook, are so disconnected. And all the information that they have, all of their knowledge is not being shared out enough. And instead of creating new platforms and new ways to speak with them, why don't we already use the tools that they're on so that we can make that transition a bit faster? And that also keeps costs quite down. If we're working on Facebook or any of these more accessible social media accounts, I think that's a faster and quicker way to engage with local communities that doesn't scare people from using them.
With me, I think it's like to make people into the action to love and save wildlife. I think first people need to know and love and take the action. So with the technology, if we be able to use that information and engage with local people, so it's one they know and they see and they experience and they fall in love with them. And the second is we can use us. For example, like if we have a better track and know where the animal, and we can use that one to hire local people to go and direct to take the visitor to see the animal. So it brings the benefit to local people, so they see the value of the wildlife and they protect the wildlife. Yeah, so I think it's, but also the technology, it works very well, for example, like implant transmitter, like if you put inside the animal and you can demonstrate in front of the community and say like, okay, we know where the animal lie on the screen. And if you confiscate the animal, we can come and cut you so that people scare and okay, like I need to leave that animal in the forest and not going to hunt. So it's huge advantage from the technology we can use to engage with community in terms of make people love or benefit for them or scaring them.
Thank you. Thank you for all the suggestions on how maybe we could increase access to technology, maybe either going through technologies that they already have access to, or maybe providing access to local communities, or maybe even lowering the cost. So another question from the audience, I think this is by Bright, is about something to do with access as well, and this is about citizen science. So his question is, how do you see citizen science helping in advancing technology and communication for wildlife conservation? So I'm not sure if any of the panelists here have experienced in citizen science. I think you guys mentioned in your presentations that there are some ways that you can help people use technology to kind of contribute to your work, to your research. So maybe you can share a bit with us about how you see citizen science playing a role in this.
Yes, so for us, actually, in terms of our research, right, we leverage quite a bit on citizen scientists and interest groups also. I think they're an integral part of research. And I think increasingly when you're looking at journals in terms of publications and so on, the editors increasingly are looking towards projects that are not just done solely by scientists, but also involve citizen scientists and the greater public, because it's much more impactful if the public and the citizens are involved also in this journey for research. So for us, in terms of leveraging on tech and how the citizen scientists use it, I think maybe one use case is in terms of data entry. So we have an issue sometimes we give citizen scientists like data sheets, and although we spend some time to explain this is how you fill up the data sheets and this is how you should enter data as such and so on and so forth, very often still, with all that effort, it still comes back in various different ways, so the data sheet, what's this mean, and so on and so forth, right? So we've come up with like the apps that are available, and again, also free, right, that you can leverage on and use to come up with these digital survey forms, so that you can enter the data. And on our side also, as researchers, when we get the data, it's clean, and then there's no like second guessing what is it that the observers or the citizen scientists have entered into their data. So that's really helpful for us. In case you're wondering what that app is, I'm not representing this app in any capacity. That's Kobo Toolbox, all right? So that's free also, right? You can all go around and use it, Kobo Toolbox.
How do you spell that?
Kobo as in K-O-B-O, Toolbox, Toolbox.
Okay, so for those noting down, that is another free tool to add to your toolbox for today. Do other panelists have anything to add about citizen science?
So I think it's the technology, it brings a huge advantage for us to collect the data, and from the data we have, it's easy to visualize and like bring the trust from local community to the conservation and or like people working in the conservation. For example, my presentation I saw, and we be able to demonstrate like, okay, over time when we're working in the forest, how change. So are there increase or decrease of the threats in the forest, decrease or increase of like the biodiversity or the species richness in the forest where we are working, or like the photo, camera trap and everything. It's so really evident, and it's not everyone can be able to come and join and see by themselves. But it's with the technology we can send out and we can spread out, and more people can get the access to the information.
I haven't worked too much with citizen science, so I'd say that that's something that we should fix. I would encourage all citizen scientists to reach out to their journalists and the people that cover their communities. We are meant to be a public service. And most journalists, I would say, are really accessible. We're on most social media and our emails are usually public. So I hope to work with more citizen scientists in the future.
That's great. A lot of support for citizen science on this panel. I think the audience seems very interested also in finding out some of the risks that you face outside of your use of technology. So maybe I'll help ask some of them. So for example, one by Janice is to address to Mr. Tai about what Vietnam does with the arrested poachers. Are they re-educated about poaching regulations? So do you teach them that this is wrong? And do you redirect them to other jobs? So for example, like after you catch them, what else can they do to earn money? Yeah.
Yeah, so we recognize we need to working with people. We need to working with illegal local community. So even if they are doing something wrong, of course, sometimes we need to make the case and showing and demonstrate to make the people scared and follow the law. But like for us, we really like recognize the human welfare, and it's even if they are doing the crime and doing illegal poaching, and like we need to treat red pike, treat them well, and also it's like okay, like after you rest, you're working with them, you educate them, and try to make them change. For example, like when we arrest people and we know who they are, so and then we send the ranger, we send the police, we send our anti-poaching member, education staff, come to their family, talking directly, engage with them to make them change. So yeah, so like we be able to continue to convince them. So yeah, be kind with people, and even if they are poacher or the criminal.
So on this trend of risks outside of technology, one audience member wants to ask Mr. Anton about how environmental issues might be embedded within political and economic issues, and how you kind of navigate that difference.
Yeah, I would say most certainly in a lot of our investigations at the Pulitzer Center, I have a few Rainforest Investigations Network colleagues here in the room with us today. The vast majority of our stories focus on environmental crimes. I think the ones I spoke about today focused on conservation and wildlife, but 80% of what we do is environmental investigations, and that definitely ties into different political situations in other countries. It's a very difficult thing to navigate. Naturally, we're thinking, as an expat in Cambodia, we're thinking about our visa situation, but also thinking about the lives and safety of our staff. And it's a difficult thing that we'll kind of need to navigate for every story. So something that I stress the most is that we do risk management planning before these trips. I would say that, of course, when you're in a city, there are threats to that, but by and large, all the reporters that I know that have gotten hurt or have had really negative situations have happened in the field. When we're out in the jungle doing our reporting, going on snare patrols, that's most often when people run into issues. So being very intentional about our risk management, thinking about who are the types of people that we're going to be running into, are there groups that we can work with that could safeguard us while we're doing our jobs? It is a huge issue. 2023 was a terrible year for journalism safety. So I think it's something that we're still trying to navigate. Something I encourage, especially young reporters, is to always take risk management very seriously. I think we're a little gung-ho in our Gen Z youth and naivete, so we think that nothing can hurt us while we're out there. And that's definitely a challenge for us is making sure that our teams are safe in the field. Of course, we'll have issues sometimes when we publish the story, when we're back in the cities, but I'd say the most pressing threats or issues that I've had have all been in the field.
Okay, maybe one to Malcolm. So since you've used technology, the work doesn't end there, right? So how do you think that the reports that you put out, the data that you put out, how do you think that contributes to the overall wildlife management scene in Singapore, and whether the public is perceptive or like has received this data and helped them approach human wildlife conservation in a better manner?
Yes, I think when you use camera traps, as Anton was talking about, using visuals to convey your signs, I think that's really key. So if you're able to show something like what camera traps do best, they capture videos of rare animals and animals maybe you don't expect might use your coverts and so on. That really is very impactful. So I think in that sense, using that sort of technology, leveraging on that, and then so showing these sort of different types of media is what engages them a bit more. Yeah.
So it seems that even though we use technology in conservation, the work doesn't end there. We have to deal with the more human kind of things that we have to go through the conservation, whether it's working with poachers or with ordinary citizens, or maybe even like the larger political climate. One question that I feel was quite good by this audience member, Benjamin, is about ease of access for information. Because we talked about how we can put information out there to let people know that these things are happening. What kind of risks do you think that they come with? So the examples that was provided is because of providing locations of wildlife might make them at risk to poaching, for example. And maybe providing locations of where you put your poacher cameras might help poachers avoid those cameras and kind of like try to circumnavigate. So how do we balance access and availability with the need to keep our information sensitive to make sure that our conservation work remains effective?
Well, I can only speak to this from the journalism side of things, but with every conservation group I've worked with, this has been the #1 issue. I want to take it to our wildlife sanctuary, but how will you keep other people from finding it? So for journalists, there are a lot of tools. I wipe all the metadata of our photos. So on your iPhone or your camera, most technology will track the latitude and longitude of where that image was taken, but you can't erase that before publication. So we do that for all of our photos to make sure that nobody could download our photo, find the lat long, and then go out and find where we saw these critically endangered species. So that's #1. #2 is just broadening out. I do believe in public access. I also believe in conservation and protection. I can mention a national park where there's a wildlife sanctuary within. You don't need to give the location. You don't need to show it on the map. Or if you show it on the map, you can just show the province that the park is in. So I do believe in access to open information. That doesn't mean you have to give them everything, especially because a lot of the animals that you guys work with are very valuable on the illegal markets. So that's something that as a journalist, conservation groups consistently ask us. And we've even had situations where we've agreed to having our photos reviewed, and people will point out landmarks, mountaintops, and say, hey, if people here will know where that is if they see your photo because of that mountaintop. So those are situations where I think journalists can work with conservationists to find a nice middle ground between editorial independence, but also conservation and wildlife protection.
Yes. So for us, if I'm thinking in terms of like the data on the research we do on straw-headed bobos, because that's a critically endangered species, as you rightfully say, is a great question. How do you share that sort of information on distribution and so on? I guess the easiest way is, at least for me is I ask my boss, right? So I ask my CEO, hey, this one can release or not? No, I mean, I'm just kidding. This is one way. The other way is in terms of you don't have to be so granular, in terms of visualizing the distribution. So you can make it very blocky, So in terms of the distribution, you don't have to be so precise as to where the high densities of individuals are. You can make it like a huge block, of 1 km by 1 km. Right, so even though you roughly know is there, still, I mean, if you as a poacher, if you go down, that data in itself is not, or that map is not entirely very useful, right, to go precisely to set up your traps or so on. So that's one way we deal with that. And then the other way also is because we're, this research in which we're doing is part of it involves a lot of stakeholders, right? So we're part of this working group that also involves NSS, like we spoke about, and some institutes of higher learning in US. Bandai Nature also is involved. So we sit down sometimes and we discuss these things, and we get everyone's input on what would be appropriate to present. So I think that helps also to get other stakeholders in the conversation as well.
For me, it's especially the communal information is very sensitive. It's always, it felt you need to looking at the law and human rights red page and see what the thing you can say. And then you need to consider of the impact when you say that information. Is that positive, negative, or more positive than negative? Or so you need to really compare, like, okay, is that better to say or not say? So yeah, so like when you work, you need to have a very clear protocol and step and be able to know like what type of information you can say and not say. For example, like we tracking the profile of all of the poacher, professional poacher or the restaurant. And that information is cannot never be able to say to the public. Only government office will be able to access to that information. Or location where we set up the poacher camp. Yeah, of course you cannot say that. If you say that, is so everyone know where they are and you can and walking and out of that location. So yeah, looking at the law, human rights, or like the sensitive of the impact of sharing that information, and you make the decision.
Oh, so every time I look at a news article or any charts, I will know that actually there's a lot of thought put behind it, and some censorship here and there, just to make sure that the information put out does not kind of like blow back on us, right? Okay, so I think we don't have much time left. To close off with maybe a final few questions, I would like to ask the panelists, like, what role do they think youths, I think Anton touched on this earlier, what role do they think youths can have in fostering technology or innovation in conservation work? I mean, given that the audience is mostly youth or young at heart, I think this would be very useful for some of us to think about and come and take back home to think about what they can do to help promote conservation efforts in Southeast Asia.
He called me young at heart. Wow. Very happy now. No, I'm not exactly that young. In terms of the youth, I think their energy is really important, and their passion and their drive. So, yeah, I mean, I would say in terms of conservation and so on, I'm just looking to my right, and you see Anton down here. He's so savvy with social media and so on, with tech, right? So I think that's where you all specialize in now, right? So I'm a social media dinosaur, right? Don't know anything about Facebook and all that, right? So this is where you guys shine, really, and being able to communicate the science to the greater masses. Like I see it in that sense. Also, we get a lot of interns coming into wildlife management research. And like I say again, the interns bringing a different kind of skill set, So I do a little bit of data analysis, but these guys that are coming in, my word, they're so good in coding, right? R coding and stuff like that. So what would take me maybe a week to go through some of this and come up with some code to analyze some sort of data, they can do so in like 2 days or so, or even a day, right? So they're really savvy in that sense, like in terms of coding and data analysis. So I think that's maybe where you guys shine and yeah, contribute quite a bit. Yep, in that sense.
For me, I think we need to. I know, like we are young and full of energy and very excited, and we find the thing and we want to take the action. But it's sometimes it different between the volunteer and the conservationist. The volunteer is you can do whatever, like a little bit you can contribute, a little bit you can contribute. That is no more. It doesn't matter. But with the conservation, if we could say like conservationist, we need to think a bit of vision, and it's long term. It's like one off and then it's gone. So it's like how your work it can be continued and contribute for long term sustainable. So it's very important. And also it's the second advice, okay, we're young and sometimes, I think it's brilliant idea and we need to do now and take the action. So it need to be think a bit careful, like even with I talking, like today talking about the wildlife drone. It doesn't mean apply to every single species, all of the different type of habitats. Like, so you need to be careful a bit of like when you start something and you need to really spend time or talking with someone experienced about that. And then from the lesson learned, you start the action, yeah.
So I'm in the first year of Gen Z. So I'm a little older than a lot of the students in the crowd, but we are technically the same generation. So I guess from my years of experience, I'd say the two things that I would really recommend that all the students here in the room especially start doing is we need to start pushing back a little bit more. We are the youths, I understand that, but we're also the future voters, and we're going to be the critical decision makers when our decisions will define whether or not any of these species survive climate change and or globalization. So I think, especially in Asia, there's been a cultural preference to always listen to our elders, which I'm a huge fan of, and we absolutely need to learn from experience. But especially from the youth, I would say we need to start practicing respectful and responsible ways to push back and make sure our voices are being heard. Let's not wait until we're no longer youth to start having our voices be heard. And I think that you guys being here at noon on a Saturday is an excellent start to that. The only other piece of advice that I would have is I grew up in Manila, born and raised. I didn't learn anything about the Mekong or many of my other ASEAN countries until I came back 10 years later. So that's something that I would say, if I would ask any of you to do, is find a friend from a different country doing similar work. I really believe in our region. I think ASEAN has a lot going for it. And only together, mostly because of our economies and our situations, can we actually save any of these animals. So for all of the youths in the room, please find one person who you don't know from a different country and connect with them, because only together are we going to figure this out. And I'm a really big believer of that. So please don't stay in your silos, don't stay in your national silos. Start reaching out to Filipinos or Cambodians or Vietnamese or Thais or Singaporeans and connect with them and see how your work complements or can help each other.
Thank you to our speakers for giving us homework and also things to take note of, some insights. So on this panel, we really explored how technology can be useful, but sometimes we need to think about what kind of impacts it might have and what kind of quirks it might come with. And also, we cannot really run away from some of the more human things that we have in conservation, which actually will be explored in the track that is coming up after this. So with that, that's the end of our panel discussion. That's all the time we have. We give a round of applause to our speakers for giving us our time and insights.
Before we close off the technology and innovation track, I would like to invite our moderator, Tui Ting, to present our speakers with tokens of appreciation.